Ladies and gentlemen, I just finished watching Squid Game 2, the entire season, and I definitely have a lot of thoughts on this one because Squid Game in general was a show that I was always really into, and I think a lot of the country, and even beyond the country, I think a lot of the world was really into the show because it really was, at least its first season, was lightning caught in a bottle. Everything that needed to go right went right. The cinematography was great. The acting was great. The time frame that it was, because it was right in the middle of a pandemic, was great. The story was new. It was really original. We hadn't seen anything like it. And even it all the way through to its completion at the end of the first season, it just all worked. So we had something really special. Again, lightning caught in a bottle. And that is a historically tough act to follow. So before we jump further into the video, there is this white cylindrical button that says the word subscribe on it. It sits pretty much right under where you're watching this video right now. And I have to tell you, it would mean the absolute world if you clicked that button. It's 100% free, and all it does is help grow this channel so we could share more videos just like this one with other people who don't know this channel exists. So if you do, I'd really appreciate it. You could always unsubscribe. It's 100% free. Back to the video. My feelings about the season are pretty much on par with a lot of what's already out there on Twitter and places like that. Like, frankly speaking, I think it's near impossible to be as good or better than season one. That was just a dynamite season. It really was in every which way. But that doesn't at all mean that this season was bad. I have very odd feelings about this season because on one hand, I thought this season was great. Sure, it wasn't the same as season one, and that's okay. That's not a bad thing. It's like kind of comparing Breaking Bad to Better Call Saul. A lot of people out there say that Breaking Bad is just like obviously better and like nothing else could come close. So they see Better Call Saul as like less than, even though I disagree with that personally. I'm making a generalization. I feel like it's the same sort of thing with Squid Game. Very hard to beat the first season, but this one just comes as close as you could really get while falling short just a little bit from a writing perspective and things like that. My problem has nothing to do with its story, because the 7 episodes we got were pretty solid. My problem is that it's not finished at all. This is just something in general that we've seen with a lot of TV shows lately, and it personally really bothered me this season. I understand that they have the finished season 3 filmed. Like, I understand they filmed all of that already. And I get from a business perspective that when you have this story with this big of a popularity, because Squid Game took over the world, and it still is in a lot of ways, shape, or form. So I understand from a business perspective, if you're only going to do 3 seasons of a story, you want to milk it as much as possible. It makes sense. It brings ratings in. It makes the companies like Netflix money. It makes the people money. It makes total sense that you'd span it out. It's just, this didn't feel complete, and it's, I think, offensive to call this season 2. It's really not. All they had to do to fix this problem was say Squid Game 2 Part 1 and make these 7 episodes that were the beginning of this season the first part, and then do 7 more as a Squid Game 2 Part 2 to finish out the story. Calling this season 2 and then calling what's coming next season 3 seems like a crime against humanity, because we didn't get any sound conclusions at all. All these characters that we were starting to feel for, starting to establish, just kind of hit pause. Like, there was nothing else. It's just like the story just hit pause at its peak. And I get that's what cliffhangers do. Like, I do understand that, but this goes beyond a cliffhanger. This is literally cutting a season in half and waiting to give you the DLC later. Like, that's what this felt like. It did not feel like a full season, and I think that's insulting. That's my biggest problem with the season so far. I could excuse majority of the other things, because I didn't really think there was much bad with this show in season 2. It's just the biggest problem, like I said, is this. There was a lot I liked, so I don't want to harp too much on what I didn't, because it's a relatively small list. From here on out, I'm just going to go through my feelings of the rest of the show and the writing and all of that. And if there's bad intertwined with the good, so be it. But the biggest problem I'm setting up front, this was a horrible excuse for a season 2, despite it being a very good 7 episodes. And again, despite it not, I think it's impossible to follow up season 1, but I think this came as close as humanly possible. It's just, again, that one big problem. But anyway, I was really concerned. Now we're going to jump into like my actual feelings and things like that. I was really concerned with the whole pink hair getting on the plane storyline at the end of season 1. That was honestly like the one part of season 1 where I was like, this is bizarre. How are they ever going to explain this away? Even the pink hair. Like, wait, like there had to have been some symbolism to it. That's what I thought this whole time, at least a little bit. But then they didn't do anything with it at all within season 2 of Squid Game at all. We see it follow up immediately, like right away from the end credits of season 1. We see it pick up right where it left off, which is great. But they didn't explain anything about the pink hair. But what they did do for us is tell a really cool story. I already went through the first episode in a separate video, so I'm not going to talk about that much. Though, I do think that was probably the best episode of the 7 episodes we got. It was really strong, and in a lot of ways, it reminded me of The Ones Who Live's first episode, which is really interesting. Like the whole Russian roulette sequence with the guy who gets the people, the recruitment guy. I don't even know his name, but that whole thing with the Russian roulette was really cool, and it reminded me a lot of when Rick Grimes met with Okafor in the first episode of The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live. I know that's a totally random comparison, but whatever, I'm not going to harp on that. Regardless, I thought all of that stuff was great, and I was also really shocked that they ended up killing the recruiter. I thought that was very interesting and an interesting way to start that out, but that's where a little bit of a writing issue comes into me. Like, this guy really has nothing to live for, so he's going to kill himself in a game of Russian roulette when he's supposed to be recruiting for the game. Like, it didn't really make any sense. I'm not going to lie, but it was fun. It was cool to watch, and I'm glad to see we got that. I'm even glad to see that we saw Sung in a different sort of state than we did in the past. I really liked that we got to see him angry. He has all of this money, this 456 billion won, that he's not doing anything with except hiring his past loan sharks to go out and find these recruiters to try to get back into the game. I thought that was an interesting way. It was not at all what I had in mind for what they would do. Quite frankly, I didn't know what they would do, but this wasn't it, and I'm glad because I think it worked really well. I genuinely do. I think all we got from that perspective of Seong trying to get back into the games was very cool. I really did like it. By the way, speaking of Seong and the other characters, I might butcher the names or I might not say them entirely. The only ones I know from this season are Seong, Thanos, and the Frontman. I don't really know any of the other names, so I'm going to have to explain them. And I'm very sorry. Yes, I get it. I should have done my homework before you go commenting on a tirade around that. I get it. Should have done it. But there's a lot of names that I'm not too familiar with. I don't know. And I'm just speaking from the heart, guys. Whatever. Anyway. So, I already talked about episode 1, but I then like where the story goes from the moment that we see in episode 2, we see essentially Seong finally getting back into the games. And I loved the sequence where Sung's in the limo and he's talking to that piggy bank thing to the front man, basically like threatening the front man, all that stuff, talking to him. And little did he know, before he opted to go back into the games, little did he know that the front man was in the car. I thought that was really cool. Like, I thought that was creative. And at that, the reason I bring up the creativity elements to this is because I thought all they were going to do for Squid Game Season 2 was redo the games and just put new characters in them. In a part, that's what they did, but this is why I applaud the season so much. It's also what they didn't do. That yes, the games were there, obviously, it's Squid Game, that was the whole point of it, but they did it in a way that felt refreshing. The only part that wasn't refreshing to me was the red light, green light sequence. I don't know about you guys, but am I the only one that finds that whole thing with the doll super fucking cringy? That's just me. I was never a fan of that, even in Squid Game Season 1. Not that it's a complaint of the show or anything like that, but the fact of the matter is, I thought that game was cringy, and I thought doing it again in Season 2 was, but it also wasn't, because it was such an interesting perspective to see Sung essentially take charge and have, this entire like hero sort of arc in the story where he's like commanding people to do it correctly or they're gonna die. I like that we saw a totally different perspective with these survivors, and I think it was pretty cool that they did that through red light, green light. Overall, I thought it worked. So again, while I was a little concerned in the beginning that they were going to go down this, copy and paste sort of storyline, they did it in ways that I wasn't expecting and in ways that felt fresh. So it's hard for me to consider any of the rehashing of things like the games a bad thing. I really don't. The closest to a bad was red light, green light, because it was the same game, but also it wasn't given the context. So I really liked that. I also personally, and I know some people online have said that they don't like that, I'm personally a fan of the fact that we're getting more character-driven storytelling this season. We did before, I get it, season 1 was character-driven, of course, but this time it's a lot more on the drama. It's a lot more on Sung trying to save the day. It's a lot more on inner mechanisms of these groups internally, and not so much on the games. I've seen that as a criticism. I don't mind it because we got something spectacular with that the first season, and we don't really need to keep seeing it over and over and over again. I'm okay that they don't do that. I like that we're furthering this plot. And I also, by the way, speaking of furthering the plot, I really liked the fact that we also had the front man come into the group and essentially be like player one from season 1, who was the original founder of the games, except this is a much more evil dude. This is the front man, and he blends in really well. I thought he was the best addition to season 2. I really did. He didn't bother me in any which way. It was keeping us all on the edge of our toes, or on the edge of our seats, I should say. Edge of our toes, is that the term? I don't know. Let me know down in the comments. But I really did like that we got all of that. I thought it just worked really well. The front man was a great character, even as much as I don't sympathize with him, and I obviously see him as the villain. I thought it just worked so well for him to come into the story. It felt natural, and it worked. I don't remember Sung's friend's name, who was also in season 1, but was actually in the games in this season. I don't remember his name, but I liked him. I also liked the guy who was also in the Marines or the military with him or whatever it was, and their dynamic, I thought it was funny. And just overall, I liked all of the characters that we focused on. The only characters that I didn't really care that we focused on were the frontman's brother storyline, and that wasn't necessarily because of him. It was more or less because of the just endless chase, I guess you could say, of what happened with them and how they were on the boat with the guy who obviously was affiliated with the Squid Games in some way, so was purposely charting them off course. Every time we cut to those scenes, I stopped paying attention. I mean, I knew what happened, but I wasn't really engaged the way I was with the A story of the entire second season. So that was one of them. And then the other, which I think they're using as setup for the final season for sure. But the other one was the triangle lady who, was like teeter-tottering on being good and bad, and she wasn't for harvesting the organs and stuff like that. That didn't really go anywhere this season, like the entire season, because it was ended way too short. But I did like the dynamic a little bit. I just didn't really care yet, because I think we're missing a lot of it that we will see very soon. So those are a lot of my thoughts on the characters themselves. As far as the story went with Sung, I thought that was really interesting, and I like how at the end we saw that the frontman obviously betrayed the group, and there was that insane shootout, which was a little too long in length, to be honest with you, even though it was cool. And I gotta say, this show did something that no other show does, and they got rid of that infinite ammo glitch, which is in all TV shows, including The Walking Dead, which I cover primarily on this channel. All those shows just act like there is endless ammo in the world. This one didn't. They had a heavy focus on stockpiling the ammo from all of the guards. And I thought that was a really nice touch because shows don't typically do that. That's how you know you have a good writer who knows what story they want to tell. It separates it apart from other stories, and I think it really is a great thing. But overall, from all the story perspectives we got, Sung coming back into the games, seeing that obviously he didn't know everything but was trying to do the right thing, but we questioned his morality a little bit through the guise of the front man. I thought it was really solid. There wasn't much complaining I have about the story at all, albeit some of the side plots and things like that, but the primary story was really good. And overall, this Squid Games universe, or this Squid Games story premise, is just so solid that even if they rehashed all the games and just did another version of season 1, and just did the games again, I don't know how much I'd complain despite it being a copy and paste. I really don't know how much I'd actually complain about that because everything really works. The cinematography, the writing so far has worked. The music in it has worked. Just the story, everything here is a really fun foundation and one that I want to keep watching. It's one that I'm invested in. So yeah, while it wasn't on the same quality, I guess technically, because season 1 was lightning struck in a bottle, I think this one held up and was nearly just as good. It just wasn't finished. I think because of that, it gets a step down in a letter grading if I were to give it a grade, because it's literally incomplete. But besides that, the 7 episodes we actually got were really solid. So that's my thoughts on Squid Game Season 2. I'm very excited to see how they wrap all of this up. I feel like we kind of have a couple ways this could go, and I'm not going to spend time in this video focusing on that, so be subscribed for another video where I talk about predictions and things like that, but I'm definitely excited to see how they wrap it up. And with all that out of the way, thank you again so much for watching this video. Be sure to follow me on X and Instagram, where I post all the time. And with all that out of the way, thanks again so much for watching, and I'll talk to you later. Peace out.